want to continue this discussion about the shooting on Wednesday as we head into this Biblical Worldview segment. And I actually have joining me now is David Closson to do that, the director of the Center for Biblical Worldview here at the Family Research Council. By the way, he's the author of Life After Roe, Equipping Christians in the Fight for Life Today. David, thanks for joining us today.
Happy Friday. Great to be with you as always, Casey.
Absolutely. Happy Friday indeed, but not a happy Wednesday and really a kind of a grim week in America. I want to get your response to this tragedy. The news is talking about it every day. It's really touched me personally because we have kids involved here, David.
Yeah, Casey, my first response is what you just said. It's grief and lament. And I don't just come at this as someone who thinks about public policy or even as a Christian or someone involved in Christian ministry. You know, I now come to a kind of a topic like this as a father now. And it's just unimaginable what those families who are affected, the two victims, 8 and 10 years old, another 15 victims, ages 6 through 15. It's a reminder what Jeremiah says in chapter 17, verse 9. The heart is deceitful above all things, and when sin takes root, it can have devastating effects. But I think I look at this with a pastoral response, wanting to grieve with those who grieve, but also recognizing kind of a biblical response that apart from Christ, the human heart really is capable of great evil.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true, and we're seeing that. I think we're in a spiritual war, and sometimes we forget that, and then it pops back in our face in a really stark way. One thing I want to ask you about is pretty much immediately after this happened, a sadly predictable trend played out where politicians sought to politicize the tragedy by talking about guns. I mean, we can have a conversation there. But what was also interesting was to see how immediately so many, particularly on the left, decided to attack prayer. For instance, we have a former White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, and she put out this tweet, got a lot of pushback. She said, prayer is not freaking enough. Prayer does not end school shootings, and, enough with the thoughts and prayers. And so, her sentiment, though, was echoed by a lot of people. I'm reminded of what Jesus said, that out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Why is it so many on the left are upset about prayer instead of some of the root causes of these shootings, David?
Yeah, Casey, I think those comments and others that I've heard like them, well, first, they reveal a deep misunderstanding of what Christians mean when we talk about prayer. Prayer is not a throwaway gesture. I think many on the left, coming from a secular humanistic worldview, kind of look at prayer kind of as just an empty thought, an empty gesture. As Christians, we have a theology of prayer. I'm thinking of James chapter 5, verse 16. Says the prayer of a righteous person has power in its working. As Christians, Jesus taught us how to pray. Of course, prayer does not undo a tragedy, but it does connect us to God, who can comfort, who can provide healing, who can change hearts. So I don't think real solutions are ever going to come when you dismiss God. From a Christian worldview, real solutions are only going to come when we turn to him, actually. I don't think prayer and action are opposites. As Christians, we're called to pray and we're called to work. Ephesians 2:10, we're the people who do good. And so, again, I just think it reveals a misunderstanding of prayer, but it is a response that a culture is going to have that has long been disconnected from a biblical worldview.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's a purposeful misunderstanding, though, I think, because their hearts, I think, of so many people now, especially on the left, have become hostile to Christianity, to the church. They think at best it's sort of like a mild-mannered moralism, and at worst it's a vehicle for a worldview that they really hate, a biblical worldview. And so when people talk about prayer and they're high in emotion, what they really believe about the church and about the Bible and about God kind of spills out. And I won't speak for any individual's heart, because it's not just Jen Psaki, it's a lot of people saying this kinds of things. But I think it reveals sort of the worldview on the left, which maybe 30 years ago, even if Republicans and Democrats disagreed, there was a general respect for prayer, a general respect for the Bible, a general respect for God. But I think we've departed from that. I want to switch gears briefly and talk about this Cracker Barrel story, David. At first, I wanted to not talk about this. I have to be honest, because I love Cracker Barrel. I love biscuits and gravy. You may, if you're watching, it's very obvious that I love biscuits and gravy by, what I'm carrying around, this weight here. But I grew up in Texas, and it was just part of it, and I love it, and I love Cracker Barrel. And, they changed their logo, of course, which got a lot of attention. I think you're not on the internet if you didn't see the new logo. They removed the man, they removed the older man and the barrel, and they have this sort of modern, hip logo. And it feels kind of bland. It feels kind of millennial. But I didn't want to attack them over that. But then it came out that they are doing all kinds of DEI and LGBT things all this time while having a conservative customer base. We got about 2 minutes left. What's going on with Cracker Barrel, David?
Yeah, I think what was revealed, and I share your sentiment, Casey. Again, I like the old logo, but it's not something that I was going to lose sleep over. But kind of as people have gotten under the hood, we've seen kind of this commitment to DEI and woke ideology, as well as significant LGBT activism. And I think, so I'm glad a lot of this has been unearthed. And again, just very briefly, I think, what we've realized is these ideas might dominate the boardroom. And clearly they do dominate the boardrooms of many corporate organizations, including places that kind of view themselves as family friendly. But, Casey, these values do not resonate with the values of everyday people. And we've seen this time and time again, whether it was Target, Bud Light a couple of years ago, that when this ideology is unearthed, your rank and file average Americans do not like it. And I think companies need to realize you go woke, you go broke, as the saying goes. But again, I kudos to Christians for using kind of their collective power. And we talked about this last week, kind of the principled stewardship.
Right.
And so I welcome this development.
Yeah, I think that's right. I love the boardroom. It may resonate in the boardroom, in some high rise, but maybe not the living room of the average American home. David Closson, director of the Center for Biblical Worldview here at Family Research Council. Thanks so much for coming on.
God bless. Thank you, Casey.